Have you ever wondered why that first deep love never quite leaves you? Even decades later, when life has changed and so have you, something about that early love still lingers in the quiet moments. A smell, a song, a glance. It's not nostalgia, it's something deeper, something permanent. When we're young, we don't just fall in love, we surrender to it completely. We give without calculation, we feel without boundaries, and we trust without fear. That kind of love isn't just an experience, it's an imprint. It shapes our understanding of connection, of vulnerability, of what it means to truly be seen by another. And even though time passes and people move on, that emotional blueprint often stays with us, quietly influencing our choices, our memories, and even how we define love itself. This speech isn't about romanticizing the past. It's about uncovering why the love we felt in our youth holds a power that endures through the entire arc of our lives. Let's explore why that young love doesn't disappear and why it's never truly meant to. When we are young, before life has had the chance to harden us or experience has carved its lessons into our skin, we love with a kind of innocence that is almost impossible to replicate. It's a love not filtered through fear or overthinking. We don't ask ourselves, is this safe, or what if it doesn't last? We simply fall, fully, openly, with our entire being. And in that moment, something profound happens. We create an emotional imprint that never really fades. You see, the first time you truly open your heart to someone, you aren't just sharing affection, you are exposing your soul. And that kind of vulnerability is unforgettable. When we love deeply in youth, we don't yet know how to protect ourselves from the ache of loss or the sting of rejection. We haven't yet built walls, and so that love becomes etched into us, not just as a memory of someone else, but as a mirror of who we were when we allowed ourselves to be that open. It's less about the person and more about the way you felt in their presence, the way your heart beat faster when their name appeared on your phone, the way your body seemed to remember them even before your mind did. That raw, aching depth of feeling, it stays. Because in those moments, we tasted something real, something alive, something more than logic, more than reason. Think about it. When you're young, you're still forming the architecture of your inner world. Your emotional framework is still under construction. So when love shows up with all its fire and softness, it doesn't just pass through, it builds itself into the foundation. It's not just a fleeting chapter, it's a structural beam, part of what holds up the whole building of who you are. That's why, even decades later, you might hear a song or catch the scent of a familiar perfume and suddenly, that feeling rushes back like it never left. It's not a longing for the person, necessarily. It's the emotional resonance of that time, that version of yourself, and that depth of connection. We don't forget those moments because we didn't just feel them. In youth, love has no blueprint. We don't yet know how to fake interest or hold back vulnerability. We don't know how to pretend we don't care when we do. That's why young love is so intense. It's love in its most unedited form. And because of that, it leaves a mark that no amount of aging can erase. But why does it stay? Why does it outlive the relationship, the person, the time? Because it awakens a part of us that no other experience does. That early, deep love teaches us something profound, that we are capable of feeling so much. And once we know the depth of that emotional ocean within us, we can never unknow it. Even if you fall in love again, deeper, wiser, maybe more peacefully, the first love remains, not as a competitor, but as a seed. It showed you what love could be, what you could be when stripped of defense and hesitation. That kind of awakening doesn't disappear. It settles into the background hum of your emotional life, always there, always influencing the way you show up in relationships. It's like a soul tattoo, silent, unseen, but permanent. And so, when people say, "You never forget your first love," it's not about nostalgia or romanticizing the past, it's about truth. It's about the reality that once your heart has expanded to make space for someone else so completely, that expansion never quite returns to its original shape. You become forever changed, not broken, not stuck, but touched in a way that time can't undo. So when you're old and sitting quietly with your memories, you won't just remember names or faces. You'll remember feelings, the way it felt to love without holding back, the way it felt to believe in forever, even if forever didn't last. That's why it stays, because in that deep, early love, we met a part of ourselves we didn't know existed. And that part never really goes away. It waits quietly inside you, not asking to be relived, just remembered. Because it was real, and what is real remains. When you're young, love isn't something you study, analyze, or try to control. It isn't measured or carefully constructed like a strategy. It just happens. It flows straight from the center of your being, untouched by the mind's calculations. That's what makes it so powerful. Young love bypasses logic. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for conditions to be perfect. It moves through you like a force of nature, unpredictable, unfiltered, and unstoppable. There's something profound in the way we fall in love before we've learned how to fear it, before heartbreak becomes a cautionary tale, before disappointment teaches us how to guard ourselves. In that unguarded state, love travels deeper, not only into the conscious mind, but into the subconscious, into places we don't even know exist yet. That's why we don't just remember young love. We carry it in our reactions, in our dreams, in the silent ways we choose or avoid intimacy, even years later. Think about how we fall in love later in life. It's often a negotiation. We ask, is this person right for me? Do they meet my standards? Are they emotionally safe? But in our youth, there are no checklists. There is only connection. That instant spark, that magnetic pull that defies explanation. That's the soul responding before the mind even knows what's happening. And this is where love carves itself into our deeper psychological layers. Because at that age, we're not just falling in love with someone else, we're forming our emotional language. We're developing how we attach, how we trust, how we respond to being wanted or rejected or seen. And since young love arrives without filters, it teaches us these emotional lessons with raw intensity. There's no protection, no armor. That's why its impact is so lasting. It's in those first, unfiltered connections that we meet the unconscious parts of ourselves, the parts that long to be held, the parts that fear abandonment, the parts that crave closeness even when it hurts. Love doesn't just make us feel, it exposes us. And in doing so, it plants seeds deep in the subconscious that quietly influence us for the rest of our lives. That's why you can find yourself, years later, reacting to a partner in ways you don't fully understand. Maybe you pull away without knowing why, or maybe you chase something that no longer exists. And if you trace it back far enough, you'll often find that the emotion you're experiencing now was first introduced to you in that early love. The subconscious remembers, and it remembers everything: the excitement, the fear, the longing, the loss. This isn't just about romance, it's about identity. Because the first time you truly love someone is also often the first time you see yourself reflected in another human being. You begin to understand your own worth through their eyes. Their affection becomes a mirror, showing you parts of yourself that had never been acknowledged. That reflection imprints deeply, not just emotionally but psychologically. So even if the relationship ends, the imprint remains. It doesn't leave just because they did. The memory isn't held in your mind, it's stored in your emotional body, in the spaces logic can't reach. That's why you can be older, wiser, even healed, and still feel the echo of that early connection in quiet, unexpected moments. You might think about them when you walk past a certain street or hear a song from a long-forgotten playlist. You might remember their laugh not as a craving, but as something familiar, something that once woke up a piece of you that you hadn't known existed. These are not signs that you're stuck. They're signs that what you experienced was real enough to leave its fingerprint on your subconscious. And real things don't just disappear. They become part of your architecture. This is why some people, even after building entire lives, families, and careers, still carry a quiet space inside them for a love that never quite left. Not because they want to go back, but because that love built something in them that nothing else touched in quite the same way. It spoke to a version of themselves they might never fully become again, but will always remember. And maybe that's not something to mourn, maybe it's something to honor. Because to have loved that deeply even once is to know something eternal, something that has nothing to do with time, outcome, or logic. It's to have touched the infinite within yourself, and to know, deep down, that no matter what changes on the surface, that part of you is still there, silent, sacred, and awake. When you're young and you fall in love, something profound happens that often goes unspoken. You aren't just falling for someone, you're creating a blueprint, a template for how you perceive connection, intimacy, and even your own self-worth. That first deep emotional bond etches itself so vividly into your being that everything afterward is, in some way, shaped by it. You may not realize it at the time because youth moves quickly and feelings come with overwhelming intensity, but those early connections create emotional fingerprints that linger long after the moment has passed. It's not just about who the person was or whether the relationship lasted. It's about how deeply you allowed yourself to feel. The way your soul cracked open and let someone in before you learned how to filter your emotions through layers of skepticism. In those moments, your heart wasn't guarded. You didn't know yet what betrayal felt like or what it meant to lose trust. You just knew the raw, unedited language of longing, and you gave it freely. And it's in that unfiltered giving where the imprint is made. That kind of love, early love, doesn't just pass through you, it shapes you. It informs the way you interpret safety and connection. If it was nurturing, you might grow up seeking warmth and closeness. If it was painful or confusing, you might learn to expect instability or push intimacy away even as you crave it. Either way, it leaves a mark. And that mark doesn't just fade because time has moved on. It stays with you because it became part of how you read emotional reality. There's often a moment years later when you find yourself in a different relationship or perhaps alone, and you suddenly notice you're responding to something in a way that doesn't make sense in the present. Maybe your heart quickens with fear when someone gets too close, or maybe you chase after people who can't love you back. And when you trace it back, what you discover is that you're not reacting to this person, you're reacting to that original pattern, written in a language you didn't fully understand at the time. And this is the strange power of love experienced in youth. It becomes part of your emotional architecture. You don't just remember the love itself, you remember who you were when you felt it. You remember the vulnerability, the sense of being seen, or maybe the pain of being misunderstood. All of those emotional textures become layers in your foundation. And over time, if you don't become aware of them, they can guide you without your conscious permission. But that doesn't mean you're doomed to relive old patterns forever. The beauty of awareness is that it gives you the power to examine the blueprint, to ask yourself, is this how I want to relate to love now? And when you do that, when you begin to notice what was written in the early days of your emotional life, you have the chance to rewrite it, not to erase the past, but to transform its influence, to integrate the lessons without carrying the wounds forward. That's where reflection becomes essential. When you look back at that young version of yourself, loving so earnestly, so fiercely, what you often find is not weakness, but bravery. The kind of bravery that comes before you've been taught to fear loss. That kind of open-heartedness is not something to outgrow, it's something to honor. Because deep down, what you experienced then still lives inside you now. It's just waiting for you to return to it with greater understanding, to see that the person you became was shaped by a feeling that once made you feel truly alive. Sometimes the longing we carry into adulthood isn't even for a specific person, but for the version of ourselves we were when we loved without barriers. And when that longing surfaces, it isn't a signal that we're broken or stuck in the past. It's a signal that our heart remembers what it means to be fully awake in love and wants to feel that again, but with more wisdom, more grounding, more awareness. So while the relationship may have ended, the story didn't. It just changed form. What you felt was real, and because it was real, it left something behind. And that something isn't a burden, it's a guide. A guide back to your truest self, waiting patiently beneath the surface of everything you've learned since. Time changes many things. It reshapes our beliefs, dulls some memories, and introduces new versions of ourselves that we could never have predicted. But strangely, when it comes to love we experienced in our youth, the kind that stirred our hearts before the world asked us to be practical, time doesn't seem to have the same power. That love remains preserved, not in the sense that it stays unchanged, but in the sense that it remains emotionally alive within us. It becomes a kind of anchor, a constant, even as we evolve. The reason it holds on so tightly is not because of what happened between two people, it's because of the emotional atmosphere that surrounded those moments. Youthful love is often not just about the other person, it's about who you were when you loved them. That moment in your life when everything felt larger than life, when your emotions weren't quieted by routine or numbed by repetition. Every word mattered, every touch was felt a little deeper, every silence said more than any speech. That's why, even after years, decades even, you can still recall how it felt to sit next to them. Even if you can't remember what exactly was said, you remember the feeling, the temperature of the room, the sound of their laugh, the way time moved differently in their presence. And that kind of memory doesn't live in the surface of the mind. It lives in the body, in the heart, in the deep folds of the psyche that don't follow the clock. People often say time heals all wounds, and yes, to a point, it does. But healing doesn't always mean forgetting. Sometimes healing means learning to live in harmony with a memory that still stirs something in you. You're not broken because that early love still brings emotion. You're not stuck in the past just because it hasn't faded. You're simply human, and what was real doesn't ask for permission to remain. As we grow older, we encounter more love, more relationships, more lessons. Some are deeper, some more stable, more compatible. But that early love is rarely replaced. It doesn't need to be. It serves a different purpose. It becomes a benchmark, not of what you're trying to find again, but of what you're capable of feeling. It reminds you of a time when love was not a decision made with caution, but an experience lived with courage. We're taught to move on, to let go, to tuck these things away neatly. But what if we didn't have to treat it like a chapter that must be closed? What if we could simply honor it as part of our emotional DNA, woven into the fibers of who we are? That doesn't mean we live in the past. It means we acknowledge how the past still breathes in us. That's the truth of emotional continuity. Some feelings, they evolve, they change shape, but their presence never fully vanishes. In fact, that lingering presence of early love can deepen our emotional maturity. It reminds us what it means to feel without calculation. It teaches us the language of empathy, of intensity, of devotion. And whether or not the person is still in our lives, that part of us awakened by them never goes back to sleep. It stays quietly lit inside us, a reminder that we are not machines, but souls in motion. You might hear a name and feel a pause in your chest. You might see a face in a crowd that looks like them, and for a split second, your mind steps out of time. That's not weakness. That's not regret. That's presence. The memory of your younger self still whispering through the corridors of who you are now. Because love, real love, never becomes irrelevant. It simply becomes integrated. And as life moves on, as we age, we begin to understand that the goal was never to erase that love. The goal was to understand what it awakened within us, what it taught us, and how it shaped the way we see the world. That's the beauty of it, that young love becomes part of the lens we see everything else through. Even when we think we've moved on, it's still there, just quieter, more patient, less demanding, but just as real. So the love you felt when you were young, it isn't just something that happened to you, it's something that became you. And that's why, through all the noise of time, it still echoes. There's something deeply mysterious about the way certain feelings embed themselves into the architecture of the soul, especially when those feelings are born in youth, when the heart is still wide open and untouched by the cold logic of caution. One of the most powerful of these is the sense that the love you experienced at that time wasn't just a chapter. It was a seed that doesn't die when the relationship ends, but instead sinks into the soil of your being and continues to grow quietly over the years. This isn't always visible on the surface. Life moves on, responsibilities build up, and the person you were back then might feel distant, even unfamiliar. But that seed of early love doesn't disappear. It transforms. It shows up in the way you care for others, in the way you long for depth in your connections, in the way you silently hope that someone will see you again with the same innocent clarity that once made your world feel lit from within. The transformation is not always graceful. Sometimes it comes with heartache, with nostalgia that arrives uninvited, like a song you hadn't heard in years suddenly playing when you're not expecting it. And for a moment, you're not who you are now, you're who you were then. Young, open, unsure, but completely and beautifully available to love. And that memory stirs something in you, not because it's painful, but because it's sacred, because it was real. As we age, our expectations of love often change. We become more guarded. We calculate risks. We measure compatibility like it's a checklist. And yet, there's always that part of us that remembers what it was like to give love without needing to know how it would end. That's not immaturity, that's purity. It's the raw honesty of the heart before it was taught to protect itself at all costs. But here's the truth. That part of you isn't gone. It's not lost. It's just waiting for you to give it permission to feel again with that kind of depth, not recklessly, but wholeheartedly. And that's the role your early love plays. Even now, it holds a mirror up to you, showing you that you are still capable of feeling as deeply as you once did. Perhaps even more so now, because you carry the wisdom of experience. So many people confuse the passing of time with the death of feeling, but they are not the same. Just because something is no longer happening doesn't mean it no longer matters. Just because a person isn't in your life doesn't mean the love you shared was any less real. In fact, the love that stays with you after everything else has changed is often the truest kind, because it's not tied to circumstance, it's tied to your essence. That's why so many people, even decades later, find themselves reflecting on the love they felt when they were young, not because they want to go back, but because part of them never left. Part of them was shaped by that love in ways they never fully understood until much later. And sometimes it's only with age that you realize just how formative that experience was, not just emotionally, but spiritually. There's a longing in the soul that never truly grows old, a longing to be seen, to be known, to be held in the fullness of who we are. And that early love, whether it lasted or not, showed you what it felt like to be known in that way, even if only for a moment. That moment lives in you. It guides you. It becomes the internal compass you use to navigate every other relationship in your life. You may have changed. You may have grown. You may have learnt the hard lessons of heartbreak and loss. But that love, it still breathes, quietly, patiently, in the background of your life like a gentle hum that never fully fades. And in the most unexpected moments, it rises to the surface, not to haunt you, but to remind you that your heart was once fully alive, that it can be again. Because love, when it is real, never truly ends. It just finds new ways to be present in your life. There is a quiet, often unnoticed truth that reveals itself only with time. When you've lived long enough to look back, not just on events, but on who you were through them. And in that reflection, one of the most striking realizations is how the love you felt in your youth never truly left you. It may have changed form, it may have softened or retreated into memory, but its influence continues to echo in the choices you've made, the values you've held, and even the way your heart responds to the world around you. That early love, however brief or intense, helped shape the internal compass you've been using ever since. This is because youthful love, more than any other, happens when the self is still forming. Your identity is still liquid, your spirit still open, and your imagination untouched by the heavy hand of disillusionment. In that space, when someone sees you, loves you, and connects with your deepest feelings, it imprints something on the soul that no amount of time can erase. And though the relationship may have ended, and though the years may have piled up, that impression remains. It shows up in your preferences, often in the subtlest of ways. Perhaps the music you still return to, the way you interpret silence, or the way you feel a certain kind of sadness in the fall air. These are not random. They're remnants, not of pain necessarily, but of depth. Of the truth that once you opened your heart without knowing how to close it. And in that openness, you were forever changed. You learned that you could feel that deeply, that you could care that much. And even if you haven't felt that exact way again, you carry the memory of it like a whisper beneath your skin. This is not about living in the past. It's about acknowledging that what is emotionally true does not operate on a timeline. Emotional truths do not age in the way we do. They do not wrinkle or grey or forget. They remain vivid because they were never meant to be discarded. They were meant to be integrated. When we talk about healing or moving forward, we often misunderstand the goal. We think it means we must let go of everything that once mattered. But real growth doesn't demand erasure. It asks for understanding. It asks us to bring forward the essence of what shaped us, without being trapped in the story that delivered it. What remains from youthful love is not just a memory of another person. It's a relationship with yourself that was awakened in their presence. A part of you learned how to feel alive because they existed in your world, even for a short time. And that version of yourself, the one who loved purely, who felt without hesitation, deserves to be remembered, even honored. Because that version of you still lives within you, even if life has tried to bury it under responsibility and fear. And perhaps the greatest gift of that early love is not the romantic memory, but the awareness it gave you of what your heart is capable of. The fact that you were able to experience love so deeply is not proof of loss. It's proof of your capacity. It's the evidence that you are a being made for connection, for vulnerability, for awe. And no matter how much life has asked you to toughen up or move on, That capacity has not left you. It waits for you to remember that you once knew how to feel with your whole being. Time doesn't take love away. What it does is teach you to see it differently. With less urgency, maybe, and more reverence. With fewer illusions, but more gratitude. You may never again love the way you did when you were young, but that doesn't mean you'll love less. It means you'll love with a quieter courage, a steadier hand, a wiser heart. But the foundation of that strength, it was built in those early days, in that first deep connection, when everything was new and sacred and terrifyingly beautiful. And that's why, even as you grow older, something in you always turns back to that time. Not because you want to relive it, but because it marked the beginning of your real emotional life. It introduced you to the vastness of what it means to be human. And that's not something you ever truly outgrow. That's something you carry forward, like a torch, lighting the way for every future version of yourself that dares to love again. If this touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and explore more videos just like this. Thank you.